July 2015 edition of Financial Empowerment, a production of the California Society of CPAs and CalCPA Institute. I'm Bill Spaniel. Dying is a subject few of us like to discuss, but it is important that we do so with our family. We need to let them know such things as to whether or not we want extraordinary measures to be taken if we are incapacitated. We also should provide them with information about important documents like insurance policies and military records. To help us get a better idea of how to handle such discussions, I talked with Kurt Kilwein, a Los Angeles CPA and certified financial planner. Hello, Kurt. Welcome to Financial Empowerment.
Hi, Bill. Nice to talk to you today.
Nice talking with you. I wanted to talk to you today about death. It's a popular subject, I'm sure, with a lot of people.
It's as popular as taxes.
Yes, as popular as taxes. And what I really wanted to get into is the arrangements around a person's death. And when someone dies, how should one go about, or who should go about making any of the arrangements, financial and otherwise?
Well, it's an interesting question. In this field, we spend a lot of time planning.
Mm-hmm.
We know eventually everybody's going to pass, whether they want to or not, or whether they acknowledge that that'll happen. We also know that there's a lot of people who want to know what's going to happen to their stuff, what's going to happen when we want a beneficiary to receive something, when do we want somebody else to step in and take over, what kind of directives do we want? Do we want to pass down any of our culture, our heritage, our values down to any descendants? Because I may never meet a great-grandchild, but maybe I want them to know who I am. And we do all this planning, and then somebody passes away and we start panicking because we don't know exactly who to call or who's supposed to take charge, or in fact, who we even want to take charge. We've set up a trustee, we've maybe set up an executor and a will, we've done all the planning. You tend to pick a trustee or an executor as somebody you trust, somebody with a lot of years of experience with you. With a husband and wife, it's usually the spouse who's supposed to take over. Otherwise, it's a trusted family friend, it's an attorney, it's a CPA. The problem is, often these people are even older than the person who's passed.
Yes. Well, one of the other things, too, is that when a person dies, sometimes the people that you want to take charge of your estate or make the arrangements for you, they're not there.
You are exactly right. And sometimes we had a client pass away just a few days ago. We looked in the will. There's an executor listed. We don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to find out. We think it's a family friend from about 25 years ago. Where is he? Did we want to still have him in that position? It's too late now. If it's not going to be him, it's going to fall to a bank who's going to take over. And banks do fine jobs, although they do charge some fees, and I used to work at a bank, so I'm familiar with that. But as far as who's actually going to do this, we pick up the will, we pick up the trust, and it's supposed to tell us who we're supposed to contact.
Well, that's on the understanding that the spouse or some close relative knows that you're the person or you're the firm that's supposed to do this kind of stuff.
Exactly. And the person who's listed is even still alive.
Yes. And how do they find out that information? Sometimes, it might be in a lockbox in a bank for all we know.
2 weeks ago, I was looking for a copy of a will. I found three.
Mm-hmm.
One from the 80s, one from the 90s, and one from 2009 that was never signed. I don't know which is the right will. They're all different. But fortunately, they all pour into a trust, which has very similar provisions to every other trust that we see in situations like this. So we're not as concerned in that situation. But should it be in a safe deposit box? Probably. The attorneys usually maintain a signed copy. Somebody will have a copy at home, although nobody will know where it is. And if it was 20 years ago, nobody will have ever even remembered seeing it. And finally, I, as a CPA, typically do have a copy as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, aside from having those kinds of a will or a trust or so forth, there's other paperwork that one has to fill out upon a person's death. And who goes about doing that?
Typically that falls upon a relative. And then you decide which is the most qualified relative for doing this. typically somebody who's a take-charge person who can actually get the thing done. After calling 911, which is probably the most important call, you do have to notify the other relatives. You have to notify anybody who's going to be taking over, the trustee, the executor, if it's a bank, whoever. You do have to let them know. Then you have to start notifying all kinds of accounts, the life insurance account, the bank account, the broker. If somebody was in the middle of a real estate deal, there's notification there. And we have, typically you have to get an awful lot of copies of the death certificate. People will get 20 or 30 copies and then find it's not enough. It all depends on what you need to do after somebody passes away. Do I need to get the life insurance paid? Do I need to get into a Facebook account? There's so many things that are going to take a copy of that death certificate. As soon as that's issued, that's probably the most important document to get a hold of.
And how do you get that death certificate?
From the county, and they're very picky now. They don't just give it to anybody. Mm-hmm. You have to prove some sort of a relationship or show that you are the trustee or an executor. With a trust, there's often not a court document. So some people will say, we need the court document. We need the letters of administration, the letters testamentary. Something from a court saying you can do this. What we have is the trust, which gives you a lot of the same powers. But sometimes you still have to, if something didn't get put into the trust, you may even still wind up opening a probate where you hadn't planned to begin with.
But when a person dies, I mean, who is the person you call to get that death certificate?
It's Los Angeles County.
What office in Los Angeles County?
It's Norwalk and the county recorder.
Okay. We're talking statewide here, so the recorder in any county is the person or the office that you should call first.
The county where the person passed away. That's where the death certificate will be filed, and it's usually available a few days later. Sometimes it's a few weeks later. Mm-hmm. There may be delays. Sometimes it's very difficult to get if somebody isn't very, they don't have a lot of relatives or, they haven't done a lot of planning. It can be difficult for somebody to get access to that death certificate.
Well, what happens about Social Security benefits and 401ks and the other investments?
We have a lot of those accounts, especially retirement accounts, have a beneficiary designation. So I decide when I set up that account who is going to receive those assets when I pass away. If I'm married, usually my spouse has to sign off on that. There are rules having to do with retirement accounts and beneficiaries. But for the most part, all they're going to do is take a look on the statement, see who you put as your beneficiary, and they're going to get the money. Same thing with the life insurance contract. I have a designated beneficiary of a life insurance product. That's the person who's going to be getting my money when I pass away. Mm-hmm. And if I put a will or a trust together and I say I want everything to go to my spouse, but somebody pulls out my life insurance policy and it's going to my ex-spouse, that's a problem because a life insurance company will and has in many situations simply paid the prior spouse. So you have to make sure those designations are up to date. Social Security, they get contacted or they are made aware when somebody passes away by the county, but you can let them know directly. They'll stop making the payments they need to make, and if you have survivor benefits or surviving spouse benefits for children, they'll start making those payments as well.
What about real estate and other property?
Real estate and other property, the title is what's going to decide who receives it. A very popular way of holding title is something called joint tenancy. It's usually a husband-wife. When one passes away, joint tenant property is automatically inherited by the other. Again, I can have a will, I can have a trust, I can say I want my half of the house to go to somebody else. It's not going to go there. It's going to go to my surviving joint tenant. Mm-hmm. Community property is a very common way of holding property in California as well. With that one, if I do have a will, let's say, for instance, we had a client years back who was a lawyer, and he had drafted a will in law school and left everything to his girlfriend and forgot about it. And then, as they always say, the cobbler's children has no shoes. A lot of attorneys and CPAs don't have wills and trusts. I mean, we spend our careers getting people to do these documents, and then we don't do them ourselves. Very common. In fact, it's so common it's almost frightening. In this particular case, then, half of the house was given to his girlfriend in law school, not his wife.
Oh.
Although she did say, okay, I'll let you invalidate the will if you give me, there was some small amount of money, 50,000, something like that. But that's the kind of thing you have to watch out for, because those documents can just come out of the woodwork.
Well, you brought up an interesting, well, at least for me, a twist on what you just said, and that is, what happens if both spouses die at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
How does that? Sometimes, if I understand correctly, who determines who passes on the estate? How is that determined?
Sometimes you just don't know who passed away first. If there's an accident, a train crash. I lost a friend in a train wreck a few years ago. His wife was not on the train, but had she been, I don't know how you would have determined who passed away first.
Mm-hmm.
In California, when we're doing wills and trusts, we typically will put in a clause that addresses this. It basically says each spouse is assumed to have passed away before the other spouse if they pass away at the same time. It sounds weird, but for technical reasons, it lets people's inheritance go where they wanted it to go, especially on second or third marriages, where you may have different families who need to be taken care of.
Oh.
The California Probate Code makes that same assumption. But if there is no will or trust, and somebody does pass away a few minutes before the other, it can really affect who receives things. So proper planning in this situation is very important.
Where do you think the important records like wills, trusts, and so forth should be stored, and how do you determine or who should get access to them, and how do you make sure they have access to them?
It's a wonderful question. We have a lot of people who will put them in a safe deposit box and then hide the key and not tell anybody they have a safe deposit box. Sometimes it takes a long time to gain access to those documents. For me, they're sitting in a writing desk in my house in an envelope that says, don't open until I'm dead. And there's a lot of things in there, and there are things that if you talk to a computer security expert, they're going to tell you, do not make a list of all your passwords and all of your login information and all of your bank account numbers and your credit card numbers, and put it on a sheet of paper and stick it someplace where people can find it. That is probably the greatest gift that you can leave to somebody who inherits from you, though. Mm-hmm. The fact that, for instance, at my house, if I were to pass away, the lights are going to get shut off, the gas is going to get shut off, cable, internet, water. I pay all of that online. I don't receive paper bills anymore. Everything's just automatic. As long as there's money in the account, the bills are going to get paid. If I pass away and the bank shuts down the account, or if I was running through a credit card because I want the airline miles,
right.
All of that is going to immediately stop, and then nobody's going to know how to do that. It's little details like that make people crazy. Last year it was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and one of the things we wanted to do was just broadcast up against a wall, get a projector, and just have a slideshow of pictures going all the way back to the 60s. So I got a scanner, and I scanned in all these pictures from the 60s, black and white pictures, and then the 70s, all these grainy color pictures, the 80s and 90s, nicer quality pictures, weird clothing and hair, but nice pictures. Starts getting weird when you hit the 2000s. In 2010, all of a sudden, I had no pictures to scan in. Where are these things? So people stopped printing them. They're all on a camera, they're on a disc, they're on Facebook, they're on Dropbox, they are on a CD somewhere getting corrupted because people think, I burned it on a CD, I'm fine. Oh, it's on that computer 3 years ago that we took down and put in the closet. How do you get to all of that stuff? Well, if I have Facebook, I can now call them and say somebody passed away. They had a problem a few years ago where they were simply shutting down everybody's accounts and erasing everything. And people were like, that's where all the pictures are. That's where all our videos are. That's where all the letters back and forth are. So now they will memorialize your account, basically freeze it and allow some access. If I have email with AOL, Yahoo, Google, any of these, what's MSN's, Hotmail, they will now allow some access if you give them proper documents so that people can go in and save these things. If all of my pictures are stored on Dropbox and I don't leave anybody my Dropbox account number and my access codes, they're going to get erased after a few months when I stop paying the bill, and then all those photos are gone. So these are things that you never really think of in the past, and who knows what the storage will be like 20 years from now. Something I haven't thought of. One other thing we like to do is we like to maybe have a second person on the primary bank account, where the money flows through for the regular things. Let's say we're having a second passing, a wife maybe passed and now the husband is passing. And I have relatives all over the country. Well, not every relative is as well off as every other relative. Can they simply hop on a plane and come tomorrow? No, I may have to pay for all of that. I may need access to cash immediately. Maybe that's the easiest way to do that, is by putting a second person on a checking account. I know there's bereavement flights and whatnot. I've never seen a good bereavement fare ever. You usually just do better on your own, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And as far as getting the information to the beneficiaries, or the responsible child who's going to be running everything, and typically if you ask a parent, hey, who's the responsible child, they'll tell you. They know the one that'll take over, whether they want them to or not.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, it's nice if, well, I don't know if it's nice necessarily, but if you have a children or you have surviving relatives, but what if you are essentially alone?
It's an interesting point, and actually there's a lot of people who, even though they may have survivors, they don't really need to do a will or a trust. I mean, again, we'll always say do a will or a trust. It's the only real way to be sure. But I actually had a copy right here, something called the California Probate Code. Every state, of course, has their own. This is your estate plan. Politicians put it together and said, hey, if you don't want to do it, we will. And maybe what's in here is exactly what you need. Maybe you go to probate court, and a judge says, I have a surviving spouse, I'm going to give them all your stuff. Or maybe I don't have children, I'm not married, but my parents are around. Well, my parents are going to get all my stuff. There's a whole list in the probate code as to who gets what and how much. And this is where the old, the old Monopoly card, inherit money from a distant aunt or something. That's where this comes from, is somebody either didn't do the planning or they simply didn't have any reason to. They said, you know what, I'm going to be gone, I don't care. But the state has it all figured out for you. So you have an estate plan whether you want one or not.
Okay. When do you think is a good time to discuss your final wishes with your family members?
Anywhere between now and never. I have, it's always an argument, because there is nothing that will tear a family apart faster than money. And not even a lot of money. Sometimes it's little things. Sometimes it's, that was Grandma's favorite lamp. She promised it to me. No, Grandma promised it to me. And now you have a fight in the family that could go on for decades. Mom promised me her wedding ring. No, she promised me her wedding ring. If you don't have these discussions, you'd never really know. Some planners will say, well, you know what, take a note and just, a sticky note or something and write somebody's name on it and slap it on the bottom of the lamp and that fixes everything. Well, some people will tell me, I have 3 kids. 2 are wildly successful, maybe richer than me. They don't need, my inheritance is going to be a rounding error in their brokerage account. But I got a 3rd one who's not really doing that great. And my inheritance would really affect them. It would have a huge impact on their life. That's who I want to give it to. But if my other 2 kids know that while I'm alive, they are never coming over for Thanksgiving again. So they won't tell them. And they'll tell everybody, don't tell them. And when I was working at a private bank, we would have notes, do not disclose this, slapped all over things, where you're not supposed to tell a beneficiary what they're getting until the person has passed away, because then they don't care anymore. I got everybody to come over for Thanksgiving. We had a client who, to keep the peace, would make annual gifts of, well, right now they're $14,000, but in order to get your gift, you have to come over for Thanksgiving. You're not there, you don't get your check. So basically you're going to pay $14,000 to go to Grandma's house and have some turkey. But there's a lot of different things that people do, and it all comes down to human relations, and it all comes down to when somebody passes away, even if you know it's coming for a very long time, it's still a shock. And if you're meeting with somebody after somebody else passes away, they may not even remember the meeting, much less what you talked about. But somebody does have to take charge. It's usually a relative, and you can usually identify who it's going to be.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kurt. You've been
you.
enlightening. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to mention?
If you go to my house, don't rob my writing desk. It's also, this is another little example. That writing desk was hand built by my great grandfather. And that side of the family goes to the eldest child. I have no children. What's going to happen to that when I pass away? I'm how many generations down now? I have to come up with that. That writing desk by itself is worth nothing, but for the family, it's invaluable. I probably should put something in that envelope about that writing desk.
Kurt has provided some excellent advice regarding end-of-life conversations. As he mentioned, it is a good idea to provide a list of your passwords as well as where your will and other vital documents are located. You can find guides and forms on several websites that will help you compile such information. We appreciate your listening to CalCPA's Financial Empowerment Program, which was produced in July 2015. If you would like to comment about our show, have a question for a CPA, or would like to suggest topics for future programs, write us at financialempowerment@calcpa.org, or simply visit www.calcpa.org. You can search there for a California CPA who can help you save on taxes, better manage your investments, or budget for those rainy days even sunny California sometimes has. Just click on the Find a CPA link. This is Bill Spaniel, and you've been listening to edition 176 of Financial Empowerment, a production of the California Society of CPAs and CalCPA Institute.